Our next guest, Ken King. Now, unlike the previous guest, Ken, I hope I got your name right. Okay, I handled that one. All right. Ken has over 10 years of experience in university sport and education, as well as private consultation and training. Ken works with Canada Basketball as a coach educator, coached men's and women's basketball at the university and elite club areas. He presently works in the private sector with training teachers, healthcare professionals, and large corporations on how to understand, train their mind and body in order to improve their daily performance, as well as working on the basketball court. So I'm pleased to present to you Ken King.
Well, yeah, Paul, I don't have a lot of people pronounce my name wrong, but I appreciate that. And you did get it right. And I don't know where you got that bio, honestly, because I'm thinking that somebody on my side probably wrote it at some point, but that sounded pretty good the way you read all that out. So I appreciate the kind intro. It's pretty cool for me to talk after Maya, because the last time I saw Maya not wearing a national team jersey was when I was coaching with the Laurentian men, and we were at Windsor, and she was still hooping at Windsor. So she had a few less injuries at that point and was still feeling fresh in those days, but still played hard back then too. So I appreciate the opportunity to follow you, Maya. And I have a little bit of a visual, because unlike the people that went before me, I can't remember what I'm going to say unless I have some cues in front of me. So they're a little bit more talented than I am, but I need a little bit of a cue so that I remember what's going on here. So a little bit about what I'm doing now. As Paul mentioned, I've coached a lot. I've coached in some different areas, and I love coaching. I haven't been able to coach over this past year, and that's been hard, just like it's not easy for many of you to be able to play. Many of you are coaches not being able to coach. And we've built our company, and actually speaking about Maya, I feel like what she's doing her master's in, I might be looking at having her come on board sometime here soon, because that stuff sounded pretty nice. But we've built our company to be somebody who's pursuing the leading edge of culture analytics, or measuring culture in groups. And we're just piloting a software now with some of the forward-thinking teams here in this country. The UBCO men's and women's team are actually piloting our Flow software, which measures basketball IQ and cultural fit within a team. So it connects individually to the values of that program and the systems that they run, and can track how well somebody fits, whether it's a recruit or a current player, into the vision for that program. So that's one of the projects that we're working on. It's all data-based. We collect a lot of data, and we use some third-party companies to give us data as well. And that's where a lot of our habit work that I'm going to talk about today comes from. So when we talk about building habits, very, very often it's presented as something that's extremely challenging, just because it's not really something that you can just change overnight. And many times we give up on those habits. And while I understand that it's kind of it's a habit to build habits, there's actually some basic steps that can go into building them that can help us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of those here. So I'm not going to start with step 3. I got a little impatient and clicked a bunch. I'll start with step 1. So step 1, one of the key things that we're finding through a lot of our data is that we need to do a better job of building awareness. And awareness is relative. And I think both people who went before me talked a little bit about control, or what's within and what's outside of your control. So when I talk about awareness, what I'm really talking about here, this is why usually I have somebody do the buttons for me. What I'm really talking about here is understanding what is within and what is outside of your control. And this is a skill. This is something you have to practice. And this is a great time to practice it, because there's so many things in the world right now that are outside of our control. So some of you might have gotten decent at this just by default. You had to get good at figuring out what's in and outside your control. And identifying what is most important to you comes from that. In addition, when we're talking about building awareness, we really want to talk about a little bit of journaling. Now, I'm not a big journaler. I'm not able to just get all my thoughts down in a book the old-fashioned way, and I'm not really that good at staying consistent with it. But one thing that I took from a friend of mine, his name is Matthew Dix. He's an author. He's a professional storyteller. He's actually on the advisory board for our company as well, so he's become a friend of mine. But he shared with me something he calls homework for life. And we've adapted that a little bit to build it into something that tracks learning about what is in and outside of control in your life. So it's actually pretty simple. Every day, you just at the end of the day reflect by putting into a spreadsheet some of the events of that day, and then think about each moment individually, and beside it, just put a little C or a little U for whether that was outside of your control, for a U, uncontrollable, or C for inside of your control. It was something that you could do something about at that time. What you'll find is many of the things that you had a high emotional reaction to were probably actually outside of your control, and you probably put some effort into those things that you didn't need to, that you should have put a little bit more into your controllables. And so when we start looking back through and identifying what is in and outside our control, we really start to feel the ability to feel a little bit more gratitude, which was spoken about already, but also a little bit more calm about what we can actually do with our lives at any given time. Step 2 to starting to build elite habits during this time or any other are to start to do the same thing, but with your habits. So listing some of the habits you have: wake up, shut off the alarm, brush teeth, hopefully at some point, eat breakfast. You should, it's a super important meal. Move a little bit, so a little bit of exercise. What do you do in the morning? Do you sit down and have a little bit of time to just be quiet before you start your day, or you're always rushing off and sleeping in? Listing your current habits is really important, and being aware of them as well. Then identify the habits that are effective or ineffective. So many people refer to habits as being positive or helping them, or negative and hurting them. But habits aren't really positive and negative. They're more effective habits that better your life, that better you and better those around you, or ineffective habits that don't better your life and they don't better you and those around you. So starting to identify those in a similar way that we identify what's inside and outside our control. Then just committing to some small changes in some of the ineffective habits, not really big ones, but just small ones. So if you want to exercise more, wake up tomorrow and do 5 push-ups. Try to do that for a week. That's those little baby step changes to building effective habits that make a big difference, and the greats are really good at. So some data to back this up that I think is really important for many of the people on here. More than 80% of the post-secondary athletes, so these are in North America, the US and Canada, in our data, said that their daily habits are actually things that are intentful. So they're really paying attention to them, and they're doing them to get better or to make themselves more effective. What this says is that when we don't pay attention to our habits, we really limit ourselves and our potential to grow and get better. Step 3 now is starting to see the difference between waiting, taking, and making. And there's a couple negatives here. So waiting is when you're just kind of sitting there waiting to get taller, which many of us have done in our lives, where we just really want to be taller as a basketball player. So we're waiting for something to change. We also have many moments in our lives where we go out and we take some attempts. And it's important to start, it's important to try, but we're really focusing on taking. A little bit better than this is the idea of making. So many coaches will tell you, and I've told some of my athletes this, instead of going out and taking 100 shots, go out and make 100 shots. It's a little more effective. But really what I want to talk about today is the idea of making your own luck and becoming a maker. And if you want to become a maker, whether it's shots, whether it's being more active or physical activity, whether it's having a little bit more control over your emotions, whether it's anxiety, stress, that kind of thing, making your own luck comes from much of what I've talked about already. Identifying what you can control and identifying habits you want to build with intent. As I said before, people who've made it to the post-secondary sport level are people who do habits with intent to make their lives more effective and the lives of those around them more effective. And next is to make those steps that you're taking towards those habits controllable. So those controllable small steps make a huge difference in getting where you want to go. And then lastly here, just before I wrap up, I'm just going to touch on the fact that consistency is key. If we're consistent at anything, small or large, the odds of it becoming elite for us are much higher. It doesn't mean big steps, it just means consistent steps. So again, if I want to be more active, I can start by doing 5 push-ups every day for a week and see where that gets me. Am I more active? Totally. Is it within my control? 100%. Am I aware of what I'm doing with a purpose? Yes, I am. And every one of those push-ups counts towards me being a little bit more active, and it's really important. And the last thing I want to leave you on today, because we see this a ton during COVID from post-secondary athletes, some of the pro athletes that we've surveyed, and some of the high school and a little bit younger athletes that I've worked with, is that if your goals and your habits are yours, it's way easier to accomplish them. It's not to say that people, on whether it's a coach or a parent or a friend who are giving you suggestions, are wrong. But if you can find a way to frame habits and goals in a way that make them your own, it makes it so much easier to make it something that you feel in control of, that you can consistently commit to, and something that you can take baby steps at every way. So find habits, find goals that you're passionate about, and those things will lead you to that mountaintop of accomplishing and building a new effective habit that can help change your life.
Ken, thank you very much. That was awesome. Lots of good advice in there. Now, Ken, I want to get this straight though. If I understand you correctly, waiting, taking, and making. Does that mean it was okay for my teammates to always be waiting because I was taking most of the shots but not making quite enough? I wonder what if that was exactly what your motivation was. I think we need to realign those priorities, don't we?
I think you should ask Hondo how he feels about that, probably.
We played together a lot, and I don't think I'm far off. Next.